It's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into some of the key issues in the spotlight right now. The 77th session of the UN General Assembly begins in New York on Tuesday.
There's certainly going to be a lot for world leaders to discuss, with the prolonged war in Ukraine and climate change causing floods and heat waves across the globe. So what topics in particular will be on the agenda that the public will need to pay attention to? For more, we have Professor Schattle of Yonsei University with us. Very good afternoon to you, Professor. And well, first off, this General Assembly, it comes at a very crucial time due to many things. And well, what do you think are some of the most important topics that leaders are going to focus on when they gather together next week?
Well, and a couple of the topics might very well surprise you. One focus, despite all those hotspots that you just mentioned around the world, one focus actually at this General Assembly meeting is going to be education. The theme of the event is actually titled Transforming Education, and as you may well know, the UN is often very concerned about trying to improve basic quality of life issues for people around the world, and improving access to education and also improving the quality of education, especially in the developing world, in poorer countries, is said to be an important theme of this upcoming summit. And I understand from the news coverage that they're also going to be focusing a lot on the rights and well-being of minority groups around the world as well. Though for sure you can expect that Russia's invasion of Ukraine will also be a focus, especially on the sidelines with all the world leaders attending, and of course the state of the COVID-19 pandemic, 2.5 years into this and 6.5 million deaths. I think there'll be conversation, at least, if not any further steps, on how better to respond globally to pandemics in the future. God forbid we get further anytime soon. And of course, the ongoing climate crisis always comes up at events such as these.
Right, and going down to something that has been going on, the U.S., according to reports, has not been issuing visas to Russian officials trying to visit New York for UN-related events prior to the General Assembly. How do you think this will contribute to tensions as we near the actual summit next week?
I'm honestly not sure, Doyen. We've not heard much on this topic since September 2nd, so it's been about 10 days since the news coverage really broke open on this particular issue, that I believe 56 Russian diplomats, including Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, have not yet been issued visas by the United States to enter into New York City. It's hard to believe that Russia would be completely shut out of this summit, but there are two big problems. And one is the invasion of Ukraine, and that, of course, has alienated the international community, all the more, in a sense, since Russia is, one of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, even, wielding veto power on that. So for Russia to stick to first of all, carry out the invasion of Ukraine and stick to it after all this time in the face of such pressure is really saying something. And also there's another problem. U.S. officials have made the point that since the invasion of Ukraine, Russia has also disrupted business at the U.S. Embassy, mainly forcing the U.S. to remove certain key officials from the embassy, especially local Russian staff that had been at the embassy that had to be let go after the invasion. So there's some unresolved diplomatic issues, not just with the invasion of Ukraine, but some accompanying trouble with the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. And it's not clear if the U.S. is holding out for some concessions from Russia on that diplomatic front, or if the U.S. and its allies, in a sense, are looking for further concessions from Russia. So we'll see. Hard to say how this one will be resolved at this point in time. We'll probably find out at the very last minute.
And of course, Professor, global unity is what we really want to see during this tumultuous time, but that obviously looks a little impossible during this General Assembly, where leaders will be making their keynote speeches as well. But what kind of messages do you hope to hear as we see this ongoing war with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the passing of the late British Queen, and this lack of, I suppose, constant in the world that we're now seeing a sore lack of?
Mostly Liz Truss, the new British Prime Minister, will be making her debut at the General Assembly, so I'm sure that she'll make some sort of reference to the passing of the Queen. And of course, the British, since they left the European Union a couple of years ago, are very keen to try to articulate their continued profile, their continued strong role in the world, despite the fact that they're not in the EU any longer. So I would think Liz Truss will probably make some statements about the passing of the Queen, yet the endurance of the British Commonwealth, and the idea that Britain will continue to try to play a role in the world sustaining human rights. She may make a mention about efforts on the part of Britain and their fellow Europeans and fellow democracies around the world to deal with climate change, probably make an expression of solidarity with Ukraine. I think you'll hear a lot of expressions of solidarity with Ukraine at the upcoming summit as world leaders take to the podium and give speech after speech. So I think Liz Truss's speech there could end up being somewhat of a highlight at this General Assembly. The question of the environment is interesting as well. Over the summer, the UN General Assembly overwhelmingly passed a resolution recognizing the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment as a basic human right, and they called for greater global efforts to ensure that that principle is upheld. So you'll probably see some references to that resolution again in the coming weeks. But again, resolutions from the UN General Assembly are not binding on the member states, and the UN General Assembly only can exert moral pressure in many respects, nothing further. So it's up to the countries attending this summit and their heads of state and heads of government to try to pick up the ball after this and try to step up their efforts on climate change. And of course, there are other summits and other protocols that can be expanded for that. So again, the General Assembly's powers on all these issues are limited and oftentimes very symbolic.
Well, thank you so much, Professor. I think for such a complicated topic, we couldn't have asked for a better way to put it. Well, we hope to speak to you again soon.
Great. Thank you very much, Yonsei, and take care.